Main event of the evening.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 10, Episode 15, Life is More Important Than Show Business.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Life is More Important Than Show Business.
We open with Roger trying to grade papers at Arnold's, while Arnold recounts his date with a Swedish masseuse, and Fonzie complains about his failure to help Joanie and Chachi get a record contract.
Their careers are going nowhere.
Roger suggests a local record company, Holstein Records, and Fonzie, convinced that he's the one to help, is reinvigorated. At the Cunningham house, Howard and Marion's conversation about linoleum is interrupted by Danny Holstein, the head of Holstein Records, who has a note from Howard after having hit Holstein's car.
Oh, dear. Did you hit someone's car again and you didn't tell me?
It's not Howard's handwriting, though. It's Fonzie's. And he didn't hit Holstein's car, he took a sledgehammer to it. He did it to get Holstein's attention, so Fonzie could get him to listen to Joanie and Chachi's band. Holstein is, naturally, furious.
You must be crazy. Hey, call me crazy, call me bizarre, but here you are, right?
But once he listens to their music, he's won over. And it helps that Fonzie promised to fix his car. A week later, Howard has placed the new linoleum kitchen floor, only to spot an air bubble that's actually his watch.
The watch that my football coach gave me, the one from high school.
He can't do anything about it, though, because Joanie, Chachi, and their bandmates Annette, Mario, and Bingo have arrived and are bickering about songs and credit on the upcoming record.
I mean, what about your lyrics? Like, I'm not going to my room. Boom, chakalaka, boom. What is that?
You making fun of my life?
Casey interrupts their shouting match, saying you never see Up With People fight like this. Jenny hits on Bingo, who is too dim to be particularly affected by her attempts, until she just outright tells him that he is her love slave now.
You adore me. You have always dreamed of me. You are my love slave.
Chachi and Mario continue to fight, but are interrupted by Fonzie. Chachi tells his cousin they're breaking up the band. Fonzie talks it over with Chachi and convinces him to be a great leader, like Custer. He was unaware that Custer and his forces all died, and admits upon learning that Custer was a moron. But the point is that Chachi needs to be a leader. Chachi rejoins his band, and manages to smooth things over for the time being.
We're gonna do my song this time, okay? Everybody's face is gonna be on the t-shirts, and Mario, you get the bed by the window.
Then Fonzie breaks the linoleum, where he thinks he sees an air bubble, and destroys Howard's watch.
You don't know how many buckets of water I had to carry to get that watch.
The first day of recording, Jenny arrives at the studio wearing matching blazers with Bingo, declaring herself to be his roadie and fiancé. Holstein greets Joanie and Chachi, but suggests they ask their friends to leave.
Oh, no, Mr. Holstein, these are my friends. They're not your friends? Oh, well, no, I'm sorry. Well, they are my friends, but they're members of my band.
Why don't you step in here for a second? I want to talk to you for a minute. Huh, Joanie? Chachi? Yeah, just for a minute.
He admits he only liked their singing, and wants to back them with professional studio musicians. But maybe they don't want to be famous, with Ed Sullivan Show appearances and gold records. While they talk, Holstein accidentally turns on the microphone, so the band hears Chachi turn down Holstein's offer.
I'm the leader, and the leader sticks by his men, and they stick by him.
Holstein ends the deal, and Joanie and Chachi claim to the band that Holstein hated Chachi's voice. Annette, Mario, and Bingo call him on it, and say they're proud of them. But the worst is yet to come, telling Fonzie.
Ooh.
Who's Fonzie?
At Arnold's, all of Joanie and Chachi's friends and family are setting up a party to celebrate their band's good fortune. Once they arrive, the embarrassed young adults try to explain what happened, and a very perturbed Fonzie takes Joanie and Chachi into his office.
So you gave up an opportunity that was going to change the rest of your life. So what? I just want to know why.
Joanie explains the full situation to Fonzie, who was initially furious, only to admit that he's proud of Chachi, and Fonzie was the selfish one for wanting to be the one to help their career. And this isn't the end. There are a lot of record companies out there, and Fonzie has a very big hammer. The party continues, and Fonzie gives Howard a new watch with Roy Rogers and Traeger on it.
That's lovely. Just what I always wanted, a Roy Rogers watch.
Wait till you see what Trigger does at midnight.
Thank you, Peter. That was Life is More Important Than Show Business. It first aired back on January 25th, 1983. Happy Days was followed that night by a new Laverne and Shirley, in which Laverne tries to turn the show's resident goofball, Chuck, and his aerospace plant co-workers into a rock and roll band.
When you play professionally, that's a whole different situation.
Yeah, well, that's what Bob Dylan said before he started making $2 million a year.
CBS aired The Wonderful World of Disney. This week they were showing the first half of The Shaggy D.A., the 1976 sequel to The Shaggy Dog.
It's Walt Disney Productions' shaggiest comedy ever. For the dog! The Shaggy D.A.
Dean Jones stars as a young man running for district attorney, but that pesky ring from the first film turns him back into a shaggy dog again. The cast includes Tim Conway, Suzanne Plachette, Keenan Wynn, Dick Van Patten, and Joanne Worley. And NBC ran a news report on the labor movement in the United States, hosted by Mike Jensen.
Let me be blunt. Is there a labor crisis in America today?
The first half of the program looks at carpenters in Houston who earn $16.25 an hour, while the second half looks at semi-skilled workers in Freeport, Texas, who earn a good deal less than that. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
Well, I have to admit, I am very intrigued by semi-skilled workers in Freeport, Texas.
As for me, I am going right to the wonderful world of Disney. I don't know what it is about those live-action Disney comedies from the 60s and 70s, but I love them.
You're lucky. The version of the Shaggy Dog franchise that I am most familiar with is the one with Tim Allen.
Also, the Shaggy DA sounds like the name of a hairdo.
Oh, it really does. A horrifying combination of duck's ass and shag mullet.
Life is More Important Than Show Business was directed by Jerry Paris and was written by John B. Collins. One of the staff writers for Happy Days in seasons 10 and 11. The most recent of his episodes that we covered was called There's No Business Like No Business. As for guest stars this week, let's start with Dick Yarney as Mr. Holstein.
My name is Holstein, and I'd like to shake your hand.
What are you running for?
Dick was a character actor from New York who worked mostly in television from the late 1960s to the early 1990s. He was the younger brother of Don Adams, and as you might guess, made a few guest appearances on Get Smart at the beginning of his career. Dick was on several other Gary Marshall shows, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, and Me and the Chimp. His other TV credits include Taxi, The Jeffersons, Amazing Stories, The Partridge Family, That Girl, Love American Style, The Wizard, and many more. Dick's movies include the Kentucky Fried Movie,
The Number of a Sheldon Grunwald,
Bone, and Rabbit Test. Sadly, he died of lung cancer in 1993. He was just 59 years old. So, Peter, what did you think of Dick Yarney as Mr. Holstein?
He's terrific in this episode. I think with a role like this, the role of the evil record executive, it's tempting to go really broad, but I think Holstein showed a good amount of restraint in this. I think it's best demonstrated in his first scene, where he has to be both horrified that Fonzie destroyed his car and amazed by the dulcet tones of Scott Baio. So I think he did a really good job at balancing that without getting too cartoony with it, although sometimes cartoony works on Happy Days. And I liked that during the scene at the recording studio, he sounded just kind of mildly put off by Joanie and Chachi not wanting to fire their bandmates. He's not really self-aware evil. He just thinks of himself as like a normal guy.
I was also surprised by how restrained the Mr. Holstein character is in this episode. I expected him to be an over-the-top cartoonish villain, possibly wearing a loud plaid blazer or maybe even a gold lame suit or something, smoking a big cigar, wearing sunglasses all the time. But Dick Yarney just plays him as a businessman. He is making good business decisions for his record label. And that's really all he wants to do here is produce a marketable record with Joanie and Chachi on it. And I think the greatest moment of acting in this whole episode is when he listens to that Joanie and Chachi demo and is just transported by the music on it.
I want to know what your name is. Yeah. I want to know where you work. And I want to know that when you look at me, soft as any touch can be.
That is real acting, because I don't think that song is very good still.
It's not a very good song, and Moran and Baio are not great singers.
But Mr. Holstein hears something. He even says, I've made money with worse.
I mean, Sonny and Cher's got a great voice, but Sonny Bono did not, and they had a career together, so maybe he could have done something with Joanie and Chachi.
Well, on the Sonny and Cher show, Sonny's lack of vocal ability was a running joke.
Woo-wee! I was singing. Did you notice? I was really singing.
Sonny knew he wasn't a great singer. We also have 3 actors imported from Joanie Loves Chachi: Daryl Morey as Mario Mastorelli, Winifred Friedman as Annette Mastorelli, and Robert Pierce as Bingo. Daryl's been on the show many times before, always as different characters. Again, he's a film and TV actor from Los Angeles, best known for his leading role in the 1976 cult classic Massacre at Central High. Peter, what did you think of Daryl Morey as Mario?
He doesn't get a ton to do outside of arguing with Chachi.
That really happened to me.
Oh, give me a break. That never happened.
Oh, now don't start.
Come on, you're trying to make me feel guilty.
So watching this episode, I think it's important to remember that all of these characters get more to do generally on Joanie Loves Chachi. and this episode is mostly just to get more people to watch Joanie Loves Chachi. I don't know that he comes across as a particularly compelling character, but you do at least get a vague idea of what his personality is like. So that's good.
Daryl has been on Happy Days many times, usually as a threatening gang member, and I think he brings a level of genuine menace in his arguments with Chachi. This could escalate into physical violence at any moment, so I think Daryl Morey adds an element of danger that would otherwise be absent from this episode.
He takes his music seriously, so good on Chachi for not firing him.
Winifred is an actress from Granite City, Illinois, who was at the beginning of a long career in TV and film. You may remember her as Stephanie, the student driver in The Naked Gun.
You damn broad!
Right, Stephanie, gently extend your arm, extend your middle finger.
On TV, she's guested on Shameless, Desperate Housewives, Married with Children, Young Sheldon, Jag, 21 Jump Street, and many more. Her movies include Evolution, Hellraiser Inferno, The Last American Virgin, Revenge of the Nerds 3, Chud 2, Bud the Chud, and Reform School Girls. So, Peter, what did you think of Winifred Friedman as Annette?
As far as this episode goes, she doesn't really get much to do except be a distaff counterpart to her brother Mario. Like him, she is arguing with Joanie and Chachi. Like him, she takes their music very seriously.
We shouldn't be arguing over whose song we're going to sing.
Thank you,
Right.
Renee. You
We
see
should
that?
be arguing over credit.
I don't think Winifred Friedman brings the degree of menace that Maury brings to his role, which is fine, but also I guess it means this isn't really a great showcase for her. Sadly.
There are a couple of mean-spirited jokes about Annette's addiction to food and her dumpy appearance. They don't want her on the t-shirt. When she hears any mention of food, she goes crazy. It's not a very flattering part, so I kind of felt bad for the actress here.
Yeah.
And then we have Robert Pierce as Bingo.
Are you going to buy me a dog?
Robert's name is misspelled in the credits, by the way. Robert is a versatile actor from Santa Monica who's been working in TV and film since the late 1970s. His movies include Suburbicon, An American Carol, The Aviator, and No Man's Land. On TV, Roberts appeared on Scrubs, Criminal Minds, Monk, Dallas, Charlie's Angels, Even Stevens, Perfect Strangers, Alice, Franklin and Bash, and many more. He's also a very accomplished tennis player. He went to the University of Tennessee on a 4-year tennis scholarship, and he was ranked the #1 player on the senior circuit in Southern California.
Kiss my ass, New York, 'cause it's tennis night. Hey-haw!
So, Peter, what did you think of Robert Pierce as Bingo?
If this was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, he'd be the one who's implied to be a stoner but isn't actually a stoner. His thing is that he takes everything literally and he's not the brightest, but he does have one moment of insight, which the other characters remark upon, and he says it comes and goes.
We'll always remember and cherish this moment when you placed our friendship above your own personal gains.
So I'm willing to say that he is the stoner of the group. He definitely comes across as a very distinct character, and I found his dynamic with Jenny to be very funny, and I kind of wish there had been some follow-up near the end, like some sort of joke about him and Jenny breaking up.
The Bingo Jenny stuff is my favorite part of this episode. Robert actually plays this character very cartoony, very over the top, very Hanna-Barbera. He is the spaced out, stoned sidekick of the group. His name is even Bingo, which was the name of one of the banana splits.
Bingo, bingo, Cooper and Strong.
He's operating on a completely different plane than most of the other characters in this. He also has that California surfer dude kind of persona going. So you see how the California surf culture is coming up in the 1960s, and they're working that into Happy Days and Joanie Loves Chachi. I like this performance. It is really, really goofy, but Robert Pierce at least seems to be having fun with it. As for songs, this is a music-heavy episode. At Arnold's, we hear Money by Barrett Strong and Up on the Roof by the Drifters. Fonzie plays a tape of Joanie and Chachi singing You Look at Me for Mr. Holstein. This was written for the episode Broadway It's Not back in season 8. It later became the theme song for Joanie Loves Chachi. And Peter, I have a theory that one of the reasons that Joanie Loves Chachi failed is that theme song. The song is a really draggy, boring ballad, and I think a lot of viewers would tune out because of that song. What do you think?
Yep. Say what you will about Blansky's Beauties. That theme song was delightful.
And the fortune waiting to be won. I want it all. I want it all.
This is just the worst of early 80s balladry.
At the party, Joanie and Chachi performed The Locomotion.
Do it nice and easy now, don't lose control. A little bit of rhythm and a lot of soul.
This was originally a #1 hit for Little Eva in 1962. What did you think of Joanie and Chachi's version of The Locomotion?
It exists.
That's all I can say for it.
They are trying so hard to make Moran and Baio into teen idols, and they are failing so hard because they don't have the voice or the specific charisma that being a pop star requires. And I like Moran a lot as an actress, but she's not a pop star.
This scene actually illustrates why Joanie and Chachi's band isn't making it. At best, they are an unremarkable bar band, just the kind of cover band that you could see in any town in America on Friday or Saturday night. There's no reason to sign them to a record label. As for cultural and historical references, Arnold is now dating a Swedish masseuse.
The Fonz fixed me up with a Swedish masseuse.
That's nice.
Swedish massage is one of the most commonly used types of massage in the world, but it's only called that in English and Dutch-speaking countries, plus Hungary. Everywhere else, it's simply called classic massage. By any name, its goal is relaxation. Swedish massage focuses on superficial muscles, making it distinct from deep tissue massage.
And the way Arnold describes it makes it sound more like pro wrestling, although I guess that was their way of getting past the censors that Arnold and the masseuse definitely did it.
Fonzie says he wants to do something big, like Eisenhower did with golf.
Golf. Anecdotes. Eisenhower and fashion, humor, Japanese obsession with.
President Dwight David Eisenhower has been called golf's ultimate ambassador. He played more than 800 rounds of golf while he was leader of the free world and typically shot in the mid-80s, which is better than average. I was a little disturbed by the fact that Eisenhower played so much golf while being president. Shouldn't he have been concentrating on being president?
Yeah, probably.
Get back to the office, Ike. Marion wants to change the linoleum in the kitchen because it's worn out after 20 years.
We haven't changed anything in this house in 20 years. It's like a museum. Excepting we don't have a gift store.
If properly maintained, linoleum can last up to 40 years, so the kitchen linoleum may have a couple more decades to go. Howard refers to Mr. Holstein as Mr. Guernsey.
No, Mr. Guernsey, look.
No, it's Holstein. Holstein, not Guernsey.
These are two breeds of dairy cattle. The Holstein is the classic white cow with black spots like the Ben & Jerry's logo. It's the most popular breed in dairy farming and is seen in over 140 countries. The Guernsey is originally from the Isle of Guernsey in the English Channel. It has a golden yellow appearance, and its milk has a very rich flavor, high in fat and protein. And now, because of this episode, if I'm ever on a game show and they're asking me to identify breeds of cow, I know two of them, Guernsey and Holstein.
There you go.
Casey says,
You know, you don't see Up with People fighting.
Up with People is a nonprofit organization that stages song and dance performances promoting racial equality and positive thinking. It was founded by a man named John Blanton Belk in the mid-1960s. The ensemble, with an ever-changing lineup, started performing at football halftime shows in the 1970s.
They do state fairs all over the world.
And football games, they are just so wonderful, excepting that one time they got all confused and spelled out Up with Poople.
Glenn Close is an alumnus, though she doesn't like talking about it these days.
Also, Up with People was funded by Halliburton.
My only real exposure to Up with People is the parody Hooray for Everything from The Simpsons.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hooray for Everything invites you to join them in a salute to the greatest hemisphere on Earth, the Western Hemisphere.
I've never actually seen Up with People performing anywhere.
I looked up their song of the same name, Up with People. It's pretty bad.
Up with people, you meet them wherever you go.
When you know about the fact that it is weapons manufacturing funded conservative wet dream, it takes on a deeply horrifying tone. Beyond the aesthetic, horrifying tone.
That's probably why Glenn Close doesn't like talking about it anymore. Fonzie mentions the movie They Died with Their Boots On.
Did you ever see that movie? What is it called? They Died with Their Boots On.
Yeah, 7 times.
All right.
This was a 1941 Western from Warner Brothers, starring Errol Flynn as Colonel George Armstrong Custer. The film culminates in the infamous Battle at Little Bighorn in Montana in 1876. It was the 8th and final film to pair Flynn with Olivia de Havilland, and it was a tremendous success at the time of its release. Chachi reminds Fonzie that Custer's men died at Little Bighorn.
Fonz, Custer's men died.
Later at the party, Chachi maintains that Custer lost all his men. This is not true, however. Custer decisively lost the battle and was killed along with 268 of his soldiers, but the 7th Cavalry consisted of some 700 men. So there were plenty of survivors from Little Bighorn. Fonzie says that the kitchen floor is now flat as Kansas.
Flat as Kansas.
Kansas is one of the flattest states in America, along with Illinois, North Dakota, Louisiana, Minnesota, and Delaware. But the flattest of them all is Florida. Peter, did you know that we were in one of the flattest states in America?
Actually, yeah, that makes sense. When I was a little kid, my sister and I and my parents used to go to what we called the Big Hill. It was not a real hill. It felt like that because compared to the rest of Illinois, it seemed like a big hill.
The Holstein Records logo showing a cow listening to a phonograph is similar to that of RCA Records. Their iconic logo features a dog listening to a phonograph. It comes from an 1868 painting called His Master's Voice.
What's a phonograph?
It's a thing to entertain dogs.
The cow is also reminiscent of the RSO Records label from the 1970s. RSO was the label with the Bee Gees on it, so it was one of the most popular record labels of the 1970s, and it has a cow on the label. Do you think it was in this episode because the Holstein Records label is like a sacred cow, and they don't want to worship at the sacred cow of greed?
Maybe, yeah.
Mr. Holstein says that Joanie and Chachi could be on The Ed Sullivan Show. From 1948 to 1971, the weekly CBS variety series The Ed Sullivan Show, originally called Toast of the Town, was TV's top showcase for all kinds of acts, including singers, dancers, comedians, jugglers, acrobats, and more. Sullivan kept a keen eye on all facets of show business and sought to put the top acts on his show. But there is no chance he would have put an act like Joanie and Chachi on there because you had to be pretty famous before you were asked onto The Ed Sullivan Show. He didn't put newbies on there. It wasn't a talent show. Holstein also says they could have a gold record. The Recording Industry Association of America, or RIAA, started giving out gold records in 1958, just a few years before this story is taking place.
Once my pants are on, I make gold records.
The first gold single for sales of 500,000 went to Perry Como's Catch a Falling Star. The first gold LP was the cast album for Oklahoma. Later, as music sales increased, the RIAA added platinum and diamond awards. Now that music is no longer a saleable commodity in and of itself, they should introduce new awards for selling like 100 physical copies, 500 physical copies. You could go aluminum or something. Nobody's going to sell 10 million copies of anything, I think, anymore.
Streaming has kind of ruined everything, huh?
Yeah, it really has. Fonzie says that Joanie and Chachi's career was going down in flames like the Hindenburg.
When your career was going down like the Hindenburg in flames.
The doomed German airship famously caught fire in New Jersey, killing 35 people in 1937. Given the current state of Joanie Loves Chachi, it was in rather bad taste to compare it to the Hindenburg.
I think the nicest thing you can probably say about Joanie Loves Chachi is that nobody died making it.
At the end, Fonzie gives Howard a Roy Rogers watch. Like both General Custer and the Hindenburg, Roy Rogers has been name-checked on Happy Days numerous times. Again, he's a cowboy singer and actor from Cincinnati whose real name was Leonard Sly. As Roy Rogers, he found tremendous success in the 30s, 40s, and 50s in films, records, and ultimately television. He was heavily merchandised in the 1950s, and there were watches bearing his picture alongside his trusted horse, Trigger. So popular were these watches that they were reissued in the 1990s. But Peter, I found out something disappointing about the Roy Rogers watches.
Oh no. Do they cause cancer?
They don't, but there is no mechanical gimmick whereby Trigger does something special at midnight. Trigger doesn't do anything. He's just a printed picture. So sorry about that. I know I should have given a trigger warning before I said that. Other observations this week. I guess Arnold is now divorced from his wife, or she's been retconned out of existence entirely. What do you think, Peter?
As we know, Arnold later appeared as a main character on Blansky's Beauties, which takes place in the then present day of the 1970s, and he doesn't appear to have aged at all. So I think that he traveled to the future for Blansky's Beauties and then traveled back for season 10 of Happy Days. And by the time he came back, Momo had thought he died. She mourned him and she moved on and maybe married someone else. And Arnold didn't want to break that marriage up. So now he's single again.
That is a very elaborate explanation. I think the writers just don't even know their own old episodes. They don't even care at this point. It's just like, whatever. He's dating a Swedish masseuse or something. Or a third possibility I didn't even think of is that he's just blatantly cheating on his wife. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like a Happy Days kind of thing.
I don't think Arnold would do that.
No. The Custer jokes in this episode reminded me of the Alamo jokes from There's No Business Like No Business, but that makes sense since the same guy wrote both of them.
Yeah, they're both hinging on the fact that Fonzie does not know that much about American history, mostly what he's absorbed from pop culture that likes to lionize terrible men doing imperialism.
Do you think they replaced the linoleum with the exact same pattern so they wouldn't have to change the set in any way?
Absolutely, I do.
At least change the set. It's season 10. Let's mix it up here. You can't even change the floor in the kitchen. So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
I love the matching blazers that Jenny and Bingo wore. I love that Jenny got this guy to notice her, and she immediately jumped to, we need to wear matching blazers. And I love the fact that Bingo is wearing shorts with them because he's just that much of a California boy.
And it looked like they were going to show some houses later. Maybe if this recording gig didn't work out, they could go into real estate. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Yeah, this episode was pretty delightful. delightful. It's got some funny moments. It's a very good showcase for Fonzie's personality, of the fact that he's good-hearted enough to want to help people, but also it does come from a place of ego. He wants people to think that he's great. He is aware on some level that he needs to work on that. But also at the same time, if he can destroy cars in order to help his cousin and surrogate sister and their friends, he'll do that. And I was also very amused by the barely even a C plot of Howard and Marion and their linoleum. I love that the ultimate payoff was that Howard got a Roy Rogers watch.
I hope that becomes consistent on the show and that for the rest of the series, Tom Bosley wears a Roy Rogers watch. This is not a very impactful episode on Happy Days. I don't think it really changes anything, but it's fun for what it is. I like Mr. Holstein, the record company executive. I even like seeing the band from Joanie Loves Chachi come over. This episode moves actually pretty fast. There's a variety of scenes in it. And I think the funniest part really is Jenny falling in love with Bingo and their whirlwind, lopsided romance that Bingo may not even be fully aware that he's in. I will ask one serious question, Peter. Is life more important than show business?
Well, when you think about it, isn't show business just a metaphor for life?
Very well stated. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's BETERVULFRANC.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Fonzie and Ashley celebrate their 6-month anniversary in Nervous Romance.
I'll try to get psyched up for it. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
I'm looking for love. I'm looking everywhere. I look outside. I look in the chair.
You who seek the answer. You who long to know the glory. Salvation is the